All right, let's jump right in. Imagine a civilization just as massive, just as advanced as ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. We're talking meticulously planned cities, bustling international trade, the works. And then, poof, it just vanished. Today, we are peeling back the layers of time to uncover the incredible story of the Harappan civilization of the Indus Valley.
And really, that question is at the heart of it all, isn't it? It's what keeps archaeologists and historians up at night. The Harappans, you see, they left behind this world of jaw-dropping achievements, but also a deep, profound silence. Their story is, without a doubt, one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the ancient world. So, to really get a grip on this, let's first talk about just how big of a deal they were. Yeah, this timeline, it really puts things in perspective. You can see the Harappan civilization kicking off around 2600 BCE. That puts them right alongside the great pyramid builders in Egypt and the legendary city-states of Mesopotamia. We're talking about one of the world's first great urban societies. They weren't just a blip on the radar. They were an absolute powerhouse of the Bronze Age. And here's the wild part. For thousands of years, their entire world was just gone, lost to history, buried under mounds of dirt until it was stumbled upon in the 1920s.
So this civilization thrived along the Indus River and all its little tributaries. Now, the first two big cities they unearthed were Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. In fact, Harappa was so important that they named the whole culture after it, the Harappan civilization. And what archaeologists found there? Well, it was nothing short of staggering. Look, we are not talking about a random collection of mud huts here, not even close. The Harappans were, and I mean this, masters of urban planning. They had a level of foresight that is just, it's mind-blowing when you remember this was a society that existed over 4,000 years ago.
So their big cities, like Mohenjo-daro, were almost all built on this really clever two-part plan. First, you've got the citadel. It's built up on a raised platform, and it's where all the major public buildings were. Think granaries, maybe administrative centers. Then you had the lower town. This was the main residential area, where everybody lived, and it was laid out in this beautiful, organized grid of streets. This was not random, chaotic growth. This was deliberate, incredibly intelligent design.
And I know this sounds like an exaggeration, but it's really not. Think about this for a second. Every single house, doesn't matter if it was a big mansion or a small home, had its own bathroom. And that bathroom was connected to a sophisticated, covered drainage system that ran under the streets. That tells you they valued hygiene and public health on a scale that was just unheard of for the time. Okay, 1, 2, 4. It seems like such a simple ratio, right? But this little detail is actually huge. It tells us that across an enormous civilization spanning hundreds of thousands of square miles, they were all using the exact same standardized bricks. That points to a really strong, centralized government or administration, someone who could enforce standards for weights, measures, and building materials across the board. It's proof of a truly unified and organized society. All right, so we know they were brilliant city planners, but who were the Harappans? What was life actually like for them? What did they make? What did they believe in? Well, the artifacts they left behind, they give us some really fascinating clues. These people were seriously skilled artisans. I mean, archaeologists have just found a treasure trove of stuff. We're talking beautiful pottery, tiny little terracotta toys, which kind of hints at a playful side to their culture, right? And some incredibly intricate jewelry made from gold, copper, and bronze. This tells us they weren't just focused on survival. This was a culture that really valued beauty and high-quality craftsmanship. And don't think for a second that they were isolated. Their economy was plugged into the wider world. They were major players on the international trade scene, exporting valuable goods like cotton, beads, and spices, while importing raw materials they needed, like tin and gold. The discovery of a huge port city, a place called Lothal, proves they were master sailors too. And here's the coolest part. We have proof from the outside. Ancient Mesopotamian clay tablets, we're talking from modern-day Iraq, actually mention trading with this far-off land called Meluha. And archaeologists are pretty much convinced that Meluha was what they called the Indus Valley civilization. It's just this incredible concrete link connecting two of the ancient world's biggest giants. Okay, so what about their religion, their beliefs? This is where things get a little more mysterious. You see, they didn't build massive temples like the Egyptians or Mesopotamians. Instead, what we find are clues. Lots of figures that seem to represent a mother goddess,
a clear reverence for nature, especially trees, and these famous seals depicting a figure that looks a lot like a proto-Shiva. And that great bath we mentioned? It was almost certainly used for ritual purification, meaning water was super important to their spiritual life.
Of course, all this amazing craftsmanship and long-distance trade had to be built on something, right? And that something was a really strong agricultural base. They grew the staples, like wheat and barley, but their real game changer was cotton. They were some of the very first people in the world to figure out how to cultivate it, and you can bet the textiles they made were a hot commodity on the international market.
And all of this, it brings us right back to the great puzzle. Because for everything we've managed to uncover about their incredible cities, their art, and their trade, the Harappans themselves are completely silent. And this is why. This is the key that could unlock their entire world. They had a written language. We found it on thousands of these little stone seals. It's a script made of pictures with around 400 different signs. But here's the thing. Despite decades and decades of work by the smartest people on the planet, nobody can read it. It's completely undeciphered. Their history, their beliefs, their stories, they're all locked away in a code we just can't crack. So what happened? What went wrong? Around 1900 BCE, after about 700 years of thriving, this amazing, highly organized civilization just starts to fade. The great cities are slowly abandoned. The big question is, why? Well, there's no one easy answer, but historians have a few leading theories. The one that has the most traction today is climate change. The idea is that the monsoon pattern shifted, drying up the rivers that were the lifeblood of their farming. Other big possibilities are a series of massive floods or earthquakes, or maybe their trade networks just collapsed. The old theory about a big Aryan invasion, yeah, that one's not as popular with most experts anymore. But it's important to know, this wasn't some apocalypse where everyone just vanished into thin air. It was more of a transformation. The people themselves didn't disappear. They moved, they migrated east, towards the Gunga Plains, and started setting up smaller communities. It was the end of the big cities, but the beginning of a whole new chapter for the people. And so, we're left with this one final, tantalizing thought. That undeciphered script is the missing piece of the puzzle. Just imagine, what if we finally crack the code? What secrets would it reveal? Would we finally learn the names of their kings and queens? Hear the stories of their gods? Or would we finally know for sure why their magnificent civilization faded away? The story of the Harappan people isn't over. It's just waiting for someone to finally read it.